technical courses at UC Berkeley. He's got a BS in Computer Science from London Imperial College, an MBA from Stern College School of Business, to name but a few. So Malcolm's now going to be taking you into the presentation on executing strategy, maximizing the value of business initiatives. So, same again, housekeeping. Please turn off your mobile phones, grab a pen and paper. We're going to pass control over to Malcolm. During the presentation, please do direct any questions to our moderator. Failing that, at the end of the presentation, we'll be putting questions to Malcolm in approximately 45 to 50 minutes. And once again, thank you. This is the final presentation of the day, so please do send your questions in direct to the moderator. So with that said, I'm going to make Malcolm the panelist. You there, Malcolm?
Yeah, Andy, I am. Can you hear me?
Fabulous. If you could speak up just slightly, that would be great for our listeners.
Yeah, is that better?
That's perfect. Yep, there we go. Perfect. Okay, Malcolm, well, I'm going to mute myself now, so if you want to go ahead with your presentation, we look forward to speaking in about 45, 50 minutes.
All right, thanks, Andy. So, hello and good evening. I'm Malcolm Faulkner. I'm actually based in Colorado, and I'm a product marketing director. Been at SAP for about 5+ years now. So the title of this presentation is Executing Strategy to Maximize the Value of Business Initiatives. And as I'm addressing a mainly European audience, and it's after regular work hours there, I sincerely appreciate you attending this session. What we're going to look at is effective strategy execution, and I'm using that term in a very broad sense to include not only strategic objectives and strategic plans, but any kind of performance improvement initiative, or for that matter, any kind of project that crosses functional or departmental boundaries, involves collaboration with outside vendors and partners. All of these projects tend to be complicated in nature. They tend to be big, involve many people, big budgets, lengthy time frames, and not surprisingly, unfortunately, are prone to overrunning both in terms of budget and duration, and correspondingly under-delivering on benefits. And there are many reasons for this, as we'll see in this presentation. One thing, that I want to get across is technology alone is not the answer. It's an enabler, but just implementing technology for the sake of doing so is not going to yield the anticipated business benefits. It's a packed agenda, and part of the reason for having so much here is that what I want to do is create awareness of the the issues that we face here. Provide some food for thought in terms of how you as an organization, as a company, can do better in terms of getting more value from the software that you implement and the projects that you're working on. That said, some of these sections are pretty short, so we'll move through them fairly quickly. Anyway, so the first section is looking at an increasingly volatile world. So in the past, when we've looked at performance management, it's almost been like, if we go back maybe 10 years or so, when things were a little more calmer in the world, it was like being a skipper on a yacht. So, periods of good visibility, reliable charts, great navigational aids. You always knew where you were. We had good weather to back it up. So in these situations, with the tools available, where there's adequate time to plan, and you only have to make some periodic corrections, and you know where you're going, things are pretty smooth. There were predictions at the beginning of this century, so 2000, that we are in this period of unprecedented economic growth and prosperity, and then bearing any kind of geopolitical upset, that would be the norm. And it seems like, looking back over the last decade, that's all we've had is one problem after another on a global scale. So the reality today is very different, and we can think of this more as being like whitewater kayaking, where the conditions are uncertain, you can't see far ahead, you rarely know exactly where you're going or what dangers exist, and you have to rely on your own quick assessment and make rapid decisions, and hopefully get things right the first time. From a kayaking perspective, this is if you're an expert kayaker, something that would be instinctive, kind of ingrained in your brain and muscles, so you have that ability to react if you capsize. But from an organizational standpoint, it's much harder, and we can't assume that these skills and this experience is something that's there and we can take for granted. What we need is a systematic way of building that knowledge and expertise into our performance management processes, and then enabling them with the best available technology. So one thing that we might want to ask our finance organizations with this awareness is that when we look at the budgeting process and what gets funded, is there cash available should business conditions change? So one of the things that we hear today is that companies aren't hiring, which is bad, but they have lots of cash on the sidelines, and that actually is a good thing because it might mean that money is available mid-year, as opposed to what typically happens, whereas there's a budget setting cycle at the beginning of the year, the money gets locked down, then if something happens and someone wants to fund a project mid-year, there's no money available. I like to look at different studies and surveys out there, and one that is done by the Conference Board is a study of CIOs globally. The most recent one revealed that the main focus for CEOs on a worldwide basis was innovation. That in order to prosper in a time of increased global competition, rising uncertainty and unpredictability, companies need to focus on innovation as a way in which they can rebound, rebuild, reinvent themselves, and ultimately grow. By this we mean innovation in terms of products, processes, organizational structure and design, and the business models that are being deployed. Again, technology is the enabler here, but it's not the magic bullet. Technology alone usually doesn't deliver the intended benefits. It needs to be coupled with organizational changes and process improvements. So should you ever fall in that trap of just thinking adding feature and function is going to yield great results and benefits, you're likely to be disappointed. Spend lots of money and ultimately not get the results you're looking for. And a good example here, I think, is CRM. I feel, having worked at a CRM company before SAP, qualified to make this statement. But CRM projects historically have a pretty high failure rate, in terms of yielding the expected benefits. And I think they're a good example to look at because, success with CRM is about strategy, it's about people, it's about process and technology. So anyway, so what this survey said was that of the top 5 strategies that CEOs are focusing on, 3 are around addressing innovation. So creating a culture of innovation by promoting and rewarding entrepreneurship and risk-taking, engaging in strategic alliances with customers, suppliers, and partners, and then finding ways to engage and incentivize talent within the organization. Translated, what that means is they are really about people-oriented solutions and not technology alone. So are we teetering on the brink of another recession? And it's something I sorely hope we're not, because it just feels like we've gone from one recession to another, and we just barely, certainly in the US, barely are recovering from the downturn that started in 2008. From a business perspective, there's not much in the way of a silver lining when we're looking at economic downturns. One silver lining might be that if you're prepared, you may gain ground on the competition. So if you're brave and you're smart and you take advantage of the downturn by looking at your business and thinking about creative ways in which you can change and do things differently, you may emerge stronger than the competition. Now, SAP, we instituted travel restrictions and sustainability initiatives. The benefit has been, improved profitability during lean times. These kind of changes, they represent the new norm. So, travel restrictions is more a way of life now, certainly, than it was in the past. And I suspect that is the future. So what we're saying here is that, you need some kind of strategic imperative or blueprint in place preparing for the worst. From an executive team, that means looking at scenarios to respond to volatile market conditions. For a finance organization, it means adopting a more agile planning approach to budgeting. For sales, it means focusing on working closer with the customer, seeing how they can deliver more value for a customer. From an overall performance or marketing perspective, it's looking at new opportunities that lie within your core competency and where you really get an advantage on the competition. So, given that this is the general situation in which we find ourselves, let's turn specifically and look at the challenges of IT, and then we'll look at the challenges for finance. So, from an IT perspective, the challenges, and this really hasn't changed. This is kind of like the world of IT, right? It's a three-legged stool. You need to manage cost. You need to be aware of risk and have the appropriate mitigations in place, and you need to deliver value for the business. The problem is for IT executives is that they struggle around what are the best strategic decisions to make and approaches to follow, because they lack a real good understanding of how they can contribute to the business. They've not really got in place always great metrics and measures by which they can show how they're delivering value to the business. So if we look at in these three areas, well, what kind of problems do we experience? Well, one is from a cost perspective, that we have an inaccurate understanding of what costs are. And when we look at new technology imperatives like cloud and virtualization, it's going to make the situation worse. We struggle with linking cost to business value and having appropriate KPI or key performance indicators. We have a poor understanding of risk and threats we face. I mean, some are obvious. I mean, if you live in San Francisco and you have an IT data center nearby, chances are you have some kind of earthquake prevention in place. Poor resource allocation is another issue. Like, resources aren't really aligned effectively to the business and where the business needs them, and in part that's because the business doesn't always do a good job, to be fair to IT, in really articulating where they need the most emphasis and what systems and applications are most critical. And then, lastly, it's a struggle to understand really the complicated environment in which IT exists. It's one of the most complicated business functions, probably the most complicated business function that exists. From a CIO perspective, what are CIOs focused on? And if you look at this chart, and I put the blue line in the middle to divide the top from the bottom, the interesting thing is that CIOs are spending most of the time in the top half, which is operational things, and where they want to be spending the time is in the bottom half, which is strategic things. So, but faced with limited time, limited budgets, the focus, not surprisingly, is on keeping the lights on. So, realistically, CIOs are consumed up the top, and now, to compound matters and make it worse, we're in the midst of some major technology shifts, right? Big strategic undertakings around mobility, around cloud, and around big data. I guess the one takeaway from this to say is that, from a strategic perspective, any strategy that gets starved of resources is not going to be successful. And from an IT perspective, that means, costs in terms of employees, training, consulting. Without, adequately investing in those areas, these major technology shifts are at risk. Interestingly, most CIOs, I might point out in this survey, said they want to be more strategic. So, not surprisingly then, CIOs are feeling overwhelmed. It's tough to keep the infrastructure running, keeping data secure. Add to that innovation and driving competitive advantages, you've got a full plate. So CIOs are getting pulled in every direction. They so often are like treated like plumbers and electricians when they're basically charging by the hour. And there is a need for that, right? We need IT operations, which is a much maligned and overlooked aspect in IT, and in many respects it's becoming a commodity. But at the same time, we need, there's this demand for CIOs to be focused on being more strategic in terms of how a technology is being used, how information is being used. If the goal is technology-enabled innovation and innovative uses of technology, then we need what we could describe as a more strategy-focused CIO or IT organization. And maybe this means that organizations need to look at creating a new team and hiring different people in those roles, and the name shifts to be something like Business Technology Innovation Group or something like that. But it's almost like we're on this, we've got this division of responsibilities, and from an organizational standpoint, we need to think about restructuring our organization a little differently. What we found in terms of IT projects based on SAP surveys is, unfortunately, they are, for the most part, delivering below value, and there are many reasons for this, right? 73% of companies don't measure the value from their applications. 50% achieve the value later than planned, and 83% don't achieve targeted benefits altogether. And you can say, well, that doesn't apply to us, we'll discount the surveys, or perhaps there's an element of denial going here. Or maybe IT doesn't really want to report, how they're doing versus the averages, because it will make them look bad. So the question might be to say to the business, well, how do you know what percentage of projects are being completed on time and on budget? And if they're not measuring this, that's a red flag, right? Both IT and the business need to be measuring performance, and so on. You could argue that the studies are wrong, but we know internally that if companies just focus on feature and function, they'll pretty much get what they pay for. So if you spend 10 million on a project, you'll get 10 million worth of benefits. But projects get approved because they have an ROI that goes way beyond that. So maybe the projected benefits are, 50 million, and you spend based on a $10 million implementation. Based on the studies, most companies, if they just focus on feature function, won't achieve that, 5x return. You've got to look at business re-engineering. You've got to look at how technology is going to change the business process and what you need to do from a process and organizational standpoint to support that. This study, which I think is quite, on the one hand, very factual, very, very comprehensive, very reliable, and at the same time kind of frightening, revealed that 1 in 6 IT projects is going to overrun by 200% and go over schedule by nearly 70%. And on average, the return, the projects are overrunning by 27%. So that means, from a customer or a partner perspective, that of every million spent on implementation, 270K is essentially thrown down the drain. The solution to this then is to introduce some kind of rigorous performance improvement best practices, and we can do that using a methodology and a product that I'm going to talk about a bit later called Strategy Management. The other thing to think about is organizational alignment. So, aligning IT and HR and other support units is a big deal. Most organizations would say they don't do a great job here. From an IT perspective, what we're talking about is, having a better understanding of the business, being able to prioritize among limited applications, and not try and treat everything as mission critical. We don't want to focus on, there's 20 applications, maybe only 5 of those are really critical to support. And enabling that with the right kind of tools to help IT stay on top of issues, being able to do root cause analysis, and then eliminate issues that recur most commonly. So switching gears and looking at finance, what we see from a finance perspective is that typically what we're looking at is a strategy through planning to execution cycle that looks like something like this. Executives, there's some kind of data gathering exercise, like big fire drill. Finance has to produce lots of reports and analysis that's used to input into a strategy planning session. The executives disappear. They come back with a new strategy or a revised strategy. That gets pushed down to the business units. Hopefully, those objectives are reflected into the budgeting process. Money's allocated to different projects. At some point during the year, there's some kind of operational and strategic review, and we see how we're doing versus our goals and objectives. Employees get evaluated, they get their performance reviews, etc., and then we loop round again. The question we might ask is, well, how well does that work in your organization? And we know that it doesn't work very well because, again, you're looking at the studies. 9 out of 10 strategies are failing because only 5% of the workforce understands the strategy. 85% of executives spend less than an hour a week focused on strategy once they've got through that planning cycle. 60% of organizations do not, and this is shocking, right, do not make the linkage between strategic objectives and what gets funded. So on the one hand, you've got these objectives that you want to focus on, On the other hand, you're not allocating the resources to them. So not surprisingly, organizations are falling short, and so on and so forth. So one, interesting, this is from Deloitte, but basically Deloitte, surveys their CEOs CFOs rather, on a quarterly basis. What they found is that, of the CFOs that they surveyed, 54% want more tools to provide metrics. Over 30% are really concerned about, being able to influence strategy and operational priorities. And again, another third are concerned about, and these are big numbers, right? Ensuring that business initiatives achieve the desired outcomes. And that aligns with our own SAP, our own internal findings, that really, there needs to be a rigorous methodology that follows on from approving business cases. And the organizations that do this are going to achieve 60% higher benefits from their business cases, 50% higher return on their investment, and are more likely to finish their projects on time and on budget. It's not just linked to strategic initiatives. It affects all kind of projects. And so really what we're looking at is very simply is a classic management 101 problem. It just gets exacerbated when we look at strategic projects because of the breadth and scope of the initiatives. And these are the projects that involve pulling multiple departments and groups together, getting alignment and focus on common goals, ensuring prioritization of resources, and aligning incentives, and then staying on top of issues. So, that's why I said at the beginning, this topic, while it's talking about, entitled strategic initiatives and strategic execution, it's really any kind of performance improvement process or project. And when you think about it, why do applications get implemented? Because they're the enabling technology that support business processes and make them more efficient, make them more effective, or ultimately we're looking at how technology can create new business scenarios and create innovation and basically drive growth and success in our organization. I said that it's a three-legged stool, right? Organization, process, and technology within IT and across the whole organization. What comes first? You need to look at the organization, the roles and responsibilities. You need to ensure that you have the right business processes, and and how does technology enable them? If you're looking at some kind of process re-engineering, what I would suggest is, don't say, well, we're going to re-engineer this process and then we're going to add a technology to it. It's really those last two, process re-engineering plus technology, should happen at the same time. So you only go through this cycle once because it's likely to be disruptive. We know that people, don't like change. So why change a process and then try and change it again by adding technology? The two should go hand in hand. From looking at our budgeting cycle, as this is key for finance, is that the budget is the primary tool for managing strategy and operations in most organizations. And the problem here is that treating the budget in isolation of the overall strategy means that the value-generating initiatives, that maybe that's 5% of the money that's available to look at medium and long-term initiatives and the things that generate growth and innovation, it doesn't get funded. What happens is the resources get allocated, spending limits are determined, the focus is very much on the current short-term goals and the short-term financial indicators. And at the end of the day, there's not enough resources and time and money available to focus on these longer-term initiatives, and that creates this kind of cycle that we see in organizations where they're performing well, then they seem to fall off the cliff, and then they have to struggle to get back up to where they were in terms of performance. So the financial tools alone, budgeting tools, aren't sufficient, and if that's all you're using in the organization, then don't be surprised if you have this kind of cyclical performance, or you're not achieving your real benefits. What you need is some kind of performance management process and technology, solution in place, system in place. If you don't have that, then largely a lot of this money is going to be wasted. Why fund projects that you can look historically back and say are going to under-deliver? Why not make the investment up front in something that will enable you to drive better performance across the organization, and then start next year from a point where you can be much more efficient and effective across the board? So what does that mean in terms of solutions? that we have a whole portfolio around analytics that cover everything from data warehousing and enterprise information to the top right quadrant or section of the wheel, enterprise performance management. And when we look at the solutions in here, which include strategy management, profitability and cost management, business planning consolidation, to name but three, these are solutions that build upon your analytical environment. So your foundation is, your data, your business intelligence tools, and so on. And then layered on top of that are the solutions that implement the business processes and depend very much on the data that's available through the data warehouse and the BI tools. It's the environment in which we capture performance, we understand and adjust execution according to the needs of the organization. That can be from a broad strategic standpoint if you're looking at strategy management, but also strategy management can be deployed very operationally, or it could be very specific when we look at something like business planning consolidation, which is very much focused around the budgeting and planning, or profitability and cost management, which is focused very much on the modeling of financial scenarios and cost and profitability and so on. So let's take a quick look at strategy management. Strategy management is focused on three areas. So initiative management, scorecard management, and then alignment, collaboration, and communication. And these are really the three elements that make up sort of like a strategy management system. The really heart and soul of it is initiative management, and this is how this solution or product really is different from just implementing BI. So most organizations have some kind of level, some kind of scorecarding solution, some kind of dashboards. We have tons of data, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. In fact, BI is great. You should have lots of BI. Being able to slice and dice and analyze data is really key in identifying, what you need to be doing better and where performance problems are and so on. But that alone is just a decision-making tool. What makes the difference and what has to follow is action. So action is what gets you from A to B. It's what makes the difference between reports on one day that show a certain set of results and reports a month later that show hopefully improved results. You've got to do something in between. Decision-making alone is simply not enough. So what we have within strategy management is this view where you can go and you can define all these initiatives. You can assign budgets, team owners, teams, co-ownership of these initiatives. You can break that down into lower levels. And basically you can manage the progress on projects that get funded through other tools like the business planning and consolidation. And it's different from, say, pure project management because of the other capabilities in the solution. But critical is the linkage between these initiatives, the associated KPIs that we're trying to impact, and then the overall business objectives. The scorecard management, and I think this is a really nice view here, enables us to see quickly across a series of objectives and KPIs performance. We can also, within the solution, set up different scorecards for different parts of the organization and compare performance. In this case here, what we're doing is comparing our internal performance against some benchmark peer averages. Another way might be if you're a sales organization and you're using a tool like strategy management, and you can compare performance across different regions or across different products and so on. And then lastly, alignment, collaboration, communication. So we said alignment of different organizations to focus on common objectives and initiatives is critical. Supporting that is the ability to collaborate, i.e. enter comments and respond to comments. So basically we can build up a commentary within the solution if there's an issue, and it's stored contextually with the KPI objective or whatever it is we're commenting on. So, let's say that we've got, in this case, we've got poor performance in a region around processing purchase orders. Someone notices that, they send a comment to the various stakeholders. People can do their research and then respond, and that information is captured contextually within the system, as opposed to being stored in email and having to go from one application to another. And then lastly, very successfully, we've put strategy management on the iPad application. So now, and a great use case, great success story has been the city of Boston, which has taken this application on the iPad and they've made it available to all their constituents. So now as a constituent, if you're in Massachusetts in the US, you can use an iPad and you can find out what your local government's doing, what they're spending on money on, how they're performing and so on. You become an active stakeholder in this conversation. We've created an enterprise version of this solution, so Again, this could be something where a CIO has the strategy management iPad application. They can, update it, or they can take the iPad into to a meeting, let's say, with the CFO, to together discuss performance on initiatives and what needs to be budgeted and what IT should be focused on, using the iPad as a tool to really facilitate that conversation. So again, this is available from the IT in store. It is a super success story of how strategy management has gone from being an on-premise solution to an iPad application and been remarkably successful. So what is it? Just a quick look at this one product, to give you kind of a flavor for it. What we're seeing here is that the overall scorecard. So we're looking at, in this case, it's an IT scorecard. And what we've got is, we've got this one objective around driving growth and innovation. And perhaps that's because this company is focused on critical projects around the big three, so HANA, cloud and mobility. But let's say we're implementing a HANA-based analytics solution, and we see that, it's great, the KPI, the objective's green, we're performing, where we want to be. And we drill down, now we look at the underlying KPI, underlying objectives, we see that the performance has been consistent over a period of months. And then we can step in, we can drill down another level now, and now we've drilled in and we're actually looking at a KPI that's associated with that objective. So within the product, what we're doing is we're associating the KPIs with the objectives. We can measure the performance of that those KPIs side by here, and again see that they're trending in the right direction. So again, it's not always what we want to see in terms of performance, but if the KPIs are red, then obviously maybe that's a case where we need to collaborate or whatever. In this case, everything's good. So what happens is now we go to the Initiative Management tab, and we can see what we've got. This one highlighted initiative is around, conducting joint IT and business planning meetings. So this is a way in which IT and business are, meeting regularly, and they're ensuring they've got alignment. So in this case, the CIO is going to go into this meeting, and it's great because he wants to report on the performance of this particular, HANA project, how well it's going, what they found out, and that would be the sort of like starting point of discussion about how IT needs more funding for other projects, how we can extend the use of HANA within the organization, to look for new opportunities, new ways of identifying improvements or innovation and so on. So what would the CIO do at this point? Well, he'd go in and maybe put a comment associated with that initiative that would then be sent out to the stakeholders. And anybody that's using this application that's, part of this team would see that comment, and they would either at least know that that's something they want to focus on, or they could respond to that comment in kind. And then lastly, this last view is the scorecard view, the way we see, again, a different view, and now we've got a little bigger screen where we're showing some of the information that you can see around the various performance objectives and KPIs. So, we think this offers a huge opportunity for customers and partners alike to really jumpstart, performance improvements. To that end, we've built an RDS that I'm about to talk about. An RDS is a rapid deployment solution. It's a way in which, customers can get up and running on strategy management, coupled with some content that comes from our value engineering organization targeted to specific business processes, and really enable them to jumpstart performance improvement. But the impetus behind this is, if you look at what goes on in typical projects, is that they're realizing about 50 to 65% of the value. So we're losing about, we're leaking about 50% of the value from projects throughout the life cycle. And there's, various reasons for this. It could be that, it's a bad project in the first part, or the expectations and the benefits are wildly optimistic. Then, we don't always, and it's very hard to do this, but realistically, we underperform on the project, typically in the 10 to 15% range. And lastly, often organizations don't really put enough attention and focus on user adoption. CRM is a great example, right? Systems implemented, we expect everybody using it. There's not enough focus on training. Everybody hates the system. No one's using it, so we lose another 25% of the value. But at the same time, most organizations would say they could do a better job here. In fact, what we found is that if you adopt a rigorous performance management methodology, you're likely to get 60% higher benefits, 53% higher return on investment, twice as likely to finish ahead of time, and nearly twice as likely to deliver on or below budget. So that alone, if you look at the cost involved in these implementations, is a huge, a very compelling story. It's like, you know what, let's focus on getting the performance management practices right and then worry about all these other projects. Because you know what, if we don't do this, we can go back to that study that says we're going to lose 27% of value on average. You start adding that up, that's a lot of money that's not going anywhere. Couple that with, leaner times that we said around, potentially teetering on the brink of another recession, and it's like, we're looking at the perfect storm here. One thing to think about is within your organization, what are your top business challenges? So these are just some of the common ones we've seen. So no real business accountability for initiatives, lack of connection between objectives and what we're focusing on, and so on. So this is just a list to think about that may, you may have some of these problems, you may have other ones, but these are typically what we see in organizations. So what we've done with this value realization management rapid deployment solution is coupled the methodology that the SAP Value Engineering and Business Transformation Services consultants talk to their customers about and implement at customers with a solution that's the enabling technology. So it goes back to that initial comment that I made. The technology alone is not the answer. Buying a performance management application isn't going to solve your problem. But buying a performance management solution, coupling it with pre-built content and best practices, and using it within the context of a rigorous methodology where you really care about performance and you're practicing all the elements around good communication, good teamwork, good visibility, good status reporting, and so on, is going to yield significant benefits. So the combined solution then, and there's two ways to go about going about this. One is that customers that buy the solution can take part or complete an SAP benchmarking survey, and these are free. Anybody can go in and do a benchmarking survey. Basically, you pick a peer group, you enter your information, you answer some questions basically on KPIs and best practices, and that information gets compiled and compared to your peer group, and then you get a report back that says how you stack up against your peers. Are you doing well in this area? Are you average? Are you a top 25% performer? Along with some recommended best practices for how you can drive performance improvement in a particular area. What do you do then? So that gives you this kind of like, A, tells you where you've got problems, B, it gives you a roadmap to how to fix those problems, and lastly, the missing piece was, well, we need a solution on which we can go and actually take action and manage progress improvement initiatives, and that solution is strategy management. How does strategy management help? Helps around accountability, alignment of objectives and initiatives, improve visibility into decision making, and then helping supporting collaboration and management of these initiatives and tracking progress and performance and so on. What do we see in terms of the benefits? So again, benchmarking is widely recognized as one of the most effective management tools for determining where organizations rank among their peers in terms of performance. So it can show you how you compare against a selected peer group, pinpoint areas where you want to focus performance. And SAP is one of the most comprehensive benchmarking programs available. This benchmarking program has been around for over 7 years. We've got something like 3,000 organizations that have participated, something like 20 different business processes represented, and each survey that you complete, you're answering questions around something like 40 KPIs and best practices. And then you get this comprehensive report back that you can load up and leverage within strategy management. So to summarize, we know, or hopefully we'd agree that there's real challenges around performance management. But the good news is there are solutions, and SAP has solutions that really can help in driving performance across really big initiatives. The big three. HANA, cloud and mobility, big strategic undertakings, big technological shifts. Critical that we get good results up front, to support continued investments in this area. if you're looking at some kind of BI upgrade, BI migration, what tools do you have in place to manage that to ensure it's going to be a smooth project, smooth progression, smooth implementation? Or take specific use cases like mergers and acquisitions. The functionality that exists in a tool like Strategy Management, we can rename the product, post-merger integration management. Everything around IT onboarding, HR onboarding, this all happens or all requires lots of collaboration, lots of alignment, lots of status reporting. Exactly what something like Strategy Management can help in terms of improving the performance, along with being able to compare the results of that acquisition against expectations 6 months to a year down the road. And lastly, any kind of implementation, let's say it's a BPC implementation, again, having a performance management solution as the backbone or foundation for managing that is going to likely ensure that you're going to better achieve expectations in terms of time and budget and benefits. Lastly, I want to kind of end with this list of, actually it's second from the last slide, but list of requirements. So if you look down this list, I suspect that most organizations would answer, yeah, they have this problem, they have this need. Okay, but this isn't a list of requirements that suggests that you need a BI solution. In all likelihood, most customers would benefit from more BI, from more analytics. But just doing BI alone isn't really going to enable you to execute better, which is what we're talking about here. So again, it's that report on day one, and then a month later you do another report. What happens in between? If you're not doing a good job on these requirements, chances are you're going to be underperforming. So what's the benefits? And this is the last slide. The benefits of enabling operations with strategy management. Being able to achieve better budget targets, delivering more from your projects and investments, greater agility, improved visibility, better being able to act on the decisions and confidently, and ultimately optimize performance by leveraging the features within the solution, and again coupled with that performance management methodology, which is what we need as well. So anyway, that is the last slide, and now I can open it up for questions.
Hey Malcolm, it's Andy from Advanced Tech. John and I sat here absolutely enthralled with your presentation. We spoke a few weeks ago for the first time, and you certainly did deliver. So thank you for that, Malcolm.
Thanks, Andy.
We've had questions come in. I'm just conscious of time and of your time also. Throughout the day, we've had a sort of consistency in the attendees looking for some guidance, perhaps in the next 12 months, in terms of what we can be doing as a SAP community. Could you give us your insights into the next 12 months and perhaps any challenges you can think of and what we could do to preempt them?
Yeah, certainly. Well, obviously what I call the big three, cloud, mobility, and big data are on everybody's minds, and that's going to remain, for the foreseeable future, a huge area of focus. But again, I think fundamentally, we look at the what I was saying about the budgeting cycle and when money's available. I would say grab it up front and really have a serious conversation around performance management. And if you don't have the metrics and data available that where you can say how your organization is performing in terms of the projects that are getting completed, on time, on budget, etc., where the overruns are, then that's a red flag as well. So I think it's kind of like you got to get the foundation right, the basics right. Otherwise, in all likelihood, you risk under delivering. And I think with things like cloud and mobility and big data, it comes back to if you get the results up front, then it's going to free up more money, more investment. That ultimately is a good thing, from an organizational standpoint, and also if you're in IT, that's always a win.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. Again, as with Steve, I know how busy you are, so I'm going to keep this very short. one question I want to take from David Caddick. David's asked around the app. Is it going to be available for other tablets and not only from iTunes?
So right now, you download it from iTunes. That's where it's publicly available. There are, the next step for strategy management would be an on-demand solution.
Okay, and is that app available on other tablets outside of the iPad?
Not at the moment.
Okay, any plans to? Do you know?
Not that I've heard, but I will look into that. But I'd assume no for now.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Malcolm. We've, as we said all day, you are the final speaker, and with the permission of yourself and the other speakers, we will be distributing contact details and presentations, and in due course replays from everyone's presentations today. So those who've asked specific questions around your presentation, with your permission, they can direct questions to you in the next week or so. Is that okay?
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. Okay, well, Malcolm, thank you so much for your time there. It's been an absolute pleasure to having you today. We'll be in contact in the next couple of days. But with that said, Malcolm, I'd like to thank you, and we'll speak very soon.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. To the attendees online, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had over 1,200 registrants for today's webinar. We've had some of the world's top speakers on SAP working today with advanced tech. If you've got any questions around the presentation today from any speakers, if you have any SAP resourcing requirements in the UK and Europe, please contact john@advancedtech.org. That's john@advancedtech.org. And over the next few days, you'll be hearing from us in terms of the speakers, the replays of the presentations, and all contact details. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to doing this again very shortly. Thank you. Bye-bye.